Hi everyone, my name is Arleen Westerhof and welcome to Economic Summit Conversations. It's a podcast series which we're doing now about Africa and the continent of Africa in connection with our latest book, A European Africa Agenda, 2025 to 2100. And today I have the real joy of interviewing someone who I respect a lot, someone who is fast becoming a friend. And her name is Emmie van Halder. Emmie hails from the Netherlands. She is, I would say, an impact investor on another level. She's a CEO and director of Power, which is an investment company, an investment fund. But Emmie is also someone who has a huge heart for Africa. And Emmie, welcome. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Emmie, you were born and raised here, and yet you spent a lot of time in Africa. How did your interest in Africa develop?
I was just invited by a friend who said, well, if you don't mind coming here very often, don't come. But if you don't, otherwise come once. And he invited me to Soweto to start with.
Oh.
And I did a small video for Google there. And I just fell in love with the people, with the sunlight, with the country, and then later on with the continent.
Yeah, I can really identify with you on that. Africa is a dangerous country for all of you, or continent, for all of you who are watching. You come and something happens to your heart.
Exactly.
And it doesn't let you go any further. And so you have a long-term commitment to Africa.
Yes.
I know we'll be there for at least the next decade, at least, probably longer, but I can oversee a decade, and so we'll do it that way. But you're obviously gifted in business. How, tell us a little bit about how that went by you. Were you born into a Christian family? You're a believer in Jesus Christ. Were you born into a Christian family? How did your interest develop, Emmie?
Well, that's an interesting question. My mother was a Billy Graham disciple. She became a Billy Graham. She gave her life to the Lord when I was about 14.
Wow.
After that, my sister, my brother, and I went to the Jesus People. So we were Jesus People kids and going on, etc. Then I went to YWAM, went to Canada, all over the place, DTS, etc., etc.
Okay.
So, but I actually was not very faithful to the faith when I came back. I wasn't in church for 25 years, and I was like doing my business. I really enjoyed doing business. And so the faith became less and less important. And I now obviously regret it, but one of the things that also ties me to Africa is that I found the Lord again there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You're going to have to talk a little bit about how that went with you. Was it a personal encounter?
Yes, well, it was very interesting. I had a hotel in Johannesburg.
Okay.
And we got new guests, and I accidentally, I saw these guys and they were investment bankers. I was like, oh, they're people that I do business with, blah, blah, blah. But then it turns out they're pastors, and they're inviting me to a meeting on Sunday. And I couldn't say no because they were my guests, right? So I went and I heard the music. It was in a tent in a township, and I heard the music and I was so scared. I didn't want to go because if you're not with the Holy Spirit is very, very scary. So I just wanted to run, but I couldn't because I needed to be polite. So I stayed. And then I left as soon as possible. But that night, this guy knocked on my door. He said, "It's your day to repent." And I was like, I know.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It says that God has strange ways.
Very strange, but very effective.
Very, very effective. Some people I know, they call them Jehovah Sneaky. Meaning that you think you're going for one thing, And in the end, you wind up doing something different than what you thought you were going to be there
Totally,
for.
yes.
Yeah, but you obviously are a woman who does have a heart for business. You're very gifted in it. And so now business and Africa. And part of the Economic Summit meeting that we had in April 2023, we were talking about things that work and things that don't work when we look to Africa, because there's been a lot of money invested in Africa. And for those watching, Emmie has written a brilliant chapter, I find, in this particular book, European Africa Agenda, about 10 reasons why Africa remains poor. But, you know, you're talking about things that work and things that don't. And let's start with just, you know, how we see impact investing these days. And first of all, for those watching, can you define impact investing? Because I know I tend to ask people what they think it is, and sometimes I ask 5 people and I get 4 different definitions.
That's probably, probably always the case. For me, impact investing is that you see the highest impact per euro that you invest, and it can be anything. And for me, it's really always on the African continent. So, except for one exception, that I invested in something last January, and that was a Christian content company that makes brilliant content for children, and it was a British company. So I made an exception there, but that was really very, very impactful, and I really wanted this to grow. But normally for me, it's Africa, and that's also because I believe that we've taken so much from the continent, we as the West, and we still, till the day of today, we do. So for me, it's just a sense of justice, I guess, to not try to pamper or not try to solve problems, but to just tap into the talent that's there, the talent pool, and help the talent to solve their own problems, because I really don't believe we should solve problems and be the white savior again. I really don't like that.
You know, that's an important point that you're making. So I know just even in these conversations too, one of the themes that keeps coming back is that Africans are resilient.
Yes.
And that they are very gifted problem solvers. They've been solving problems on a scale that many of us in the West can't even imagine for decades, if not longer. And so we tend to treat them as unable to solve problems, but they are very much so able.
Yes. In addition, I would say Africa is 54 countries, and people in Nigeria, you cannot compare to people in Malawi. Like, Nigerians are the problem solvers. I mean, they are so gifted in finance and all kinds of things. And this also goes 2 ways, obviously. But then you look at Malawi, that's like, oh, you know, the sun comes up anyway, and so completely different. So I think to look at the continent is complicated, and the solutions are also quite complicated.
So it begins with maybe understanding also too the regional differences and getting to know the people and the contexts in which they're living. When you spoke last April at the Economic Summit, you talked about, and also in your chapter, you talk about, instead of always looking for the unicorn, which is a company that you can invest in that yields at least 20 times more than the investment in it, we need to also start to look at camels. We need to start to look for camels, a lot of camels.
Yes, I believe that, you know, there's a lot of investment going into Africa, not enough, not by far enough. But everybody's looking for that unicorn because, you know, you make 20 times your investment. And I understand that if you come from a total monetary side. On the other hand, we have invested in a cheese factory in Malawi. I mean, that was a very small amount of money, comparatively, a very low tech. So there was no way that there could be a unicorn because it was low tech and there's just different metrics about that. Mm-hmm. But the investment was earned back in 7 months. 1,000 farmers are now every day selling their milk. All the hotels in Blantyre get this cheese, buy this cheese. So I'm saying that is one of the biggest successes, you know. And no, it wasn't a financial whoopee, but it's what people need. They have a business, they have one truck, it goes well. What all they need is a second truck.
Yeah.
And even from a financial standpoint, you have this famous hockey stick that your turnover all of a sudden whoops. But it's very costly to invest in those things because you know you have to either do big due diligence for a small thing or the same due diligence for a big thing. So it's costly for most investors, and that's a sad thing because this is where the gaps are on the continent. They call it the missing middle, and it's like the underside of the middle, but yes, that's where I believe we can make the most impact.
Yeah, and let's talk about that due diligence, because indeed that due diligence that we all insist upon in the West is really holding things back in a number of ways.
Yes, and also, I don't know if you've ever seen a business plan with a negative outcome.
No.
So I haven't either. So paper is very patient. So you can write the most beautiful business plan, so you can have the best ideas, but it's all in the execution as well.
Yeah.
So for me, there's a lot of gut feeling about investments as well. And sometimes, you know, at a certain level of investment, I'm saying these are the blue eye investments that you just say, okay, I believe that person, I trust that person to deliver, I trust the impact, and we go for it. And usually that turns out better than poring over the numbers that are fictive anyway.
You know, that's a really important point that you're making. Just the need to be relational. As I'm pretty certain it's not just for Africa.
True.
I'm pretty certain it's for other emerging continents too, emerging economies, just anywhere, regions. But the need to be relational, the need maybe not to look so much at what's the return and how quickly can we maximize the return, but develop relationships of trust so that when you get a return, that it's a good return and it comes within a reasonable amount of time, but you can't do that with a spreadsheet or an algorithm.
Not really, no.
No, you've got to know the people, and that's something that's really, really important. I remember also too, you know, another strategy that you talked about was so often, you know, from the West we look at investing 5 million or something in that one company that we think the unicorn, that's going to be the unicorn, but 19 out of 20 don't pan out. And so there's a lot of money is lost there, whereas, for example, investing 100,000, if you have an investment amount of 5 million, 100,000 in a couple of companies that are not so sexy,
right? Exactly.
But you know, but are needed. They're meeting needs.
Yeah.
You know, that actually often works out better, and it gives a benefit for more people long term.
That's true, but the investors like sexy. They like it to look cool and go fast, and they put a lot of emphasis on this one unicorn. And also, it's also sad for the 19 others, because the 19 others don't actually get the attention that they need. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessary to have these odds. It's crazy. I mean, if I look back on my history, those odds are not at all applicable. I think if you work with somebody, you help them, you're there for them, you're backing them, you understand the problems, your odds can be much, much, much better. You can have maybe have 2 failures out of 20. I really believe so. But you need to have the back of that founder. You have to have the back of those people. You have to be behind that team, not let them go if the turnover doesn't seem to be, materializing. I'm now invested very heavily, also personally in my time, in an AI company for African languages. So this is huge investment in terms of time, because you develop a local African language from scratch, which is very time consuming and amazing that it can be done, but it takes time. It takes time to, you have 3,000 languages in Africa, but I surely believe that this can be a solution for many, many problems. So yes, it will take a lot of time, effort and money to get there, but it can be very important across the board for everything in Africa.
And so that says to me then that as we look at emerging economies, as we look at Africa, but other areas too, we got to go in there with a different set of lenses and a different mindset. As you say, be patient, but also become involved.
Yes.
Personally involved with those companies that we invest in. We have to.
Yes, for instance, if you look at South Africa, you want to address the European market, it's very difficult. It's far away. It's very expensive to get there. You can't do everything by Zoom. So if you work with a founder from South Africa, they need open doors in this market.
Yeah.
I can call Albert Heijn and say, okay, here's this company, can you talk to them? And I can open a door or whatever. And they do need that access. So very often what you see is that what's lacking is not knowledge, it's not technology, it's not intelligence, but it's networks. So we, besides the money, which is very important, the networks are key.
Wow, networks are key. I think that this is actually probably one of the key points in this conversation. I mean, it's the relational, the networks, but also how do we relate to those there? Because I know you spend time in Africa, you go, you see the needs, you look at what's being done already, you talk to the people, you get to know them, you also listen to what the needs are.
Yeah, I think it's very important that, African people have their problems and not the problems that we think they have. Mm-hmm. And then they come to us, and they come to me sometimes and say, well, this is a problem, can you help? And I'm like, yeah, that's better than telling them, well, you need this or you need that. It's a different world. It's a different set of problems, and there are different priorities. And yes, I do need to know where the pain is. So this person, that the founder, needs to know the pain personally, have felt the pain, and they will go through everything to get that healed. Mm-hmm. And there you can help. There you can say, okay, you understand that problem better than anyone. Well, I can help you. I don't understand your problem this much, like the language issue. I didn't sit in that classroom at 4 years old and somebody screamed in English at you while you have never, heard the language before, but I can feel your pain. You can understand how to solve that problem, and I can help you solve that problem by just backing your solution and not inventing my solution for you.
Yeah, you know what, and that's so important, backing their solutions. So I remember a couple of years ago, chatted with someone who's also involved with impact investing, and they were in a war-torn area, Darfur, at that time when it was still an area of conflict. But one of the things he mentioned was, he said, never go in there with money in the beginning. It's just, I go in there and I see what they're doing already and see what are the solutions that they're working on that we can back.
Yeah, it's true. Probably the best strategies are invented mainly in those areas, in the area where there's the conflict in Darfur. You understand it better than anybody else coming out from the outside. Yeah, there are some exceptions, of course. I also invested in a medical company. It's also pain from Africa. It was a medical doctor who worked in Uganda in a hospital, and saw that the diagnosis of babies was very difficult. Came back home, met some other people. They created a sort of a diagnostic thing. Okay. But it's totally a problem that was felt in Africa, and mothers that lost their children, that was not necessary. And that pain was taken up very, very personally by this doctor, and he was like, I got to build a team to make these hospitals, more resilient and give them more power to themselves so that they can actually, save more lives. And that's what's happening. So that's amazing. But it's all about pain, solving a problem.
And maybe that's what the purpose of business should always have been. Because it started out, purpose of business, look for a need, a problem that you can solve, instead of look for an opening where you can make the most money. And we're not anti-profit, just for those who are watching, because without any profit, you have no business.
Exactly.
And you're not able to help. So we're not that idealistic that we don't see the reality of that. But I'm noticing too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, a lot of us who are people of faith, when we enter business, we tend to do business the same way that the world does. When I say the same way that the world does, it's looking for how quickly can I gain things back. It's more extractive, short-term results, etc. That has been the case in the past. Have you noticed any difference, any change, Emmie, in that? Is my question a bit clear?
Your question is totally clear, but I do not...
Or do you see something very different?
No, but I don't work with a lot of people of faith working in this area, so I don't have an answer. What I do see is that many people of faith think they have to give to charity to solve problems, and doing business is a completely different thing. While we think that those shouldn't be apart. I don't believe you have to give money to a charity and then fill your pockets on the other way, be extractive on the other side. That just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I see a change, but I really believe in making the continent, helping the continent solve its own problems and not be extractive. I totally believe that we should stop doing certain things in a certain way in Africa. If that's happening, I don't know. I hope you're right.
Okay, you know what, that helps then. Just because even though, we provide platforms that convene also business people, I do have to confess that when I'm in Africa, I'm there with a different set of lenses than someone who's actually knee-deep in business. And so that's something that is, I do need to confess. One of the last things I want to talk to you about is we talked about the difference between French and non-French Africa. I was going to say French and English-speaking Africa, but you also have Spanish and Portuguese and others. So French and non-French Africa. And a number of people who I know, they've talked to me about the fact that things are so much worse in the former French colonies, not only in Africa, but across the globe. And that was a shocking, shocking thing for me to realize in your chapter in this book on 10 Reasons Why Africa is Poor. This is one of the main reasons.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about the Pacte Franc-Afrique?
Yes, well, when I tell this to people, they think that can't be true. So that is my disclaimer. Unfortunately, it is true that till the day of today, France still gets taxes out of Africa, Francophone countries that were colonialized by them. It used to be 14 countries, and there are a few things. They have to pay taxes still, and it's to a staggering amount of 500 billion euro per year. So that is already almost impossible to get out of poverty as a country like that. On top of that, they have to have half of their reserves in the French Reserve Bank. So how can you invest in innovation? How can you invest in your health system? How can you invest in anything? So that is taken from France to the day of today. Then, we give, from the other hand, the European Union wanted to give 150 billion to prevent migration, to create jobs, etc., etc. But that's over 5 years, and this is 500 million a year. So it's a ridiculous comparison.
Yeah.
But if you look at, for instance, Niger, why do you think it revolted? Because the price of uranium was actually dictated in 1962. So one of the poorest countries in the world is actually totally rich in resources. So much of the uranium comes from there. It's actually excavated by children very often, and it's really terrible. So you can understand that Niger said, well, so much for that. So France, we are now putting a price on the uranium of 100 euro per kilo, something.
Market value.
Market value, and forget about the colonial tax.
Yeah.
So, yes, not so strange that they have a coup, successful coup.
Yeah, and I suspect we're going to see that more.
Yes.
And for those of you who are watching who are French, it's time to read up on that, maybe, and just this is a key reason. But also, too, you talk in your chapter about, unfair import taxes that we as Europe and the United States levy against goods coming from Africa. And so as a result, it's just, it's not just corruption on the African front.
Correct.
We have a big role to play in that too.
Yes, no, our agricultural policies are a very big problem as well, because for the import there are so many rules and regulations that many African farmers cannot comply. And now you have the Green Deal, which sounds great, but it means that a smallholder farmer needs to report his data. I mean, how?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that's not possible. So there's another, barrier being put up for, imports into the European Union. On the other side, if we have some surplus in some agriculture, we just dump it to low prices on the African market. So how is that economy ever going to work?
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And so it sounds like, and I know you're also busy with it, others are busy with it, but it sounds like in addition to stimulating agriculture, for example, or other things, it's as those of us who have networks in the West, we really need to start to also come together, work together, to start to maybe even just put pressure on our own politicians to start to talk about this, because I know migration throughout Europe and the US, big topic, but people don't leave home just for the fun of it and try to cross over into another nation just for opportunism, it's just you leave everything behind you, and it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous. And so there's not only a brain drain, but there's also a brave drain from those nations.
Totally.
And I'd like to say, too, that, and it's true, between now and 2050, there's going to be a need for 450 million extra jobs on the African continent.
Yes, but we also need a lot of food worldwide, so there's huge potential, and we just need to do it in a fair way and help with technology. That's fine to assist in getting better productivity, because you can have a lot higher productivity in agriculture. But there's lots of things. There's minerals. There's all these resources. There's talent. There's IT talent. There's huge talent. So we need to use that talent. For this AI company, we have brilliant talent from the African continent. If you look at Tunisia, for instance, there's 10 universities that have had AI for the last 10 years.
Wow.
So you get fantastic talent.
Yeah, and as we wind down, I know that this particular AI company has your heart. Tell us about Batasia.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Batasia is a company that was built because of two sisters sitting in school and not and being taught in English, which was very strange. So they, they were privileged, so they could come to the Netherlands and study and get their PhDs and the whole thing, but they never forgot the fact that they had such a disadvantage by being taught in a language that wasn't their native language. So they thought maybe AI is going to help us. So they started a company to put African language models on the market. And why I'm so excited about it, it can help with education, illiteracy, etc. But also, if you imagine having a fintech and you want people to be financially included, so you say, oh, they need to all use these financial apps and send money. Would you send money if you wouldn't understand 100% was on your mobile phone? No, you wouldn't. You want to help a farmer with the weather forecast. They need to understand it.
Yeah.
So in each and everything here, having the local languages, the native languages helps in development. So that's why I'm so excited about it.
Because this is huge.
Yeah, it's
a green field.
Yeah.
To invest in that there, and once the AI gets a foothold in there, it can go very, very quickly to help a lot of people.
Yes. Now we have for instance, Chichewa, with 24 languages, but Chichewa from Malawi. It's essential because this country is one of the poorest in the world.
Yeah.
So many people are illiterate. So many people, want to do something but don't have the means. So I'm so happy that stuff is working there in education, making people understand. You have text-to-speech, speech-to-text, so you don't even have to read, but then you can be included in the global economy.
Yeah.
You can be included if you're a gifted artist. You can find out things, how to do things better, whatever you want to do. It's all available on the internet, but if you can't read it, it's difficult.
It's very, very difficult. I mean, this is really, really fascinating. It's so tremendously important too. And this is about this generation, but also the next generation. Yeah. And so, Emmie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Essentially, what we've talked about, it's about going, listening, but then coming alongside people and helping to facilitate them solving their own problems. And they'll do it much better than we ever could.
That's true.
Yeah. Emmie, if people want to contact you to learn more about what you're doing, how can they do that?
Yeah, the easiest is via LinkedIn, just Emmie van Halder at LinkedIn.
Okay,
yeah.
Emmie van Halder at LinkedIn. Emmie, thank you. And this won't be the last time that we're talking, but once again, I want to encourage you, if you haven't gotten this yet, it'll be available also digitally if you do not live in Europe very, very soon, within the next month and a half. If you do live in Europe, you can contact us at Economic Summit. Really, read Emmie's chapter and the chapter of the other authors. One of the comments that we've gotten about the book is that it's not just a theoretical piece. It's a book written by practitioners. It has depth, but it also is very, very readable. Emmie, thank you.
Thank you, Arleen. It was my pleasure.